Close your eyes for a second. Think back just 15 or 20 years. Think about a time when you could sit across a dinner table from someone with a different political sticker on their car and actually talk. You might have disagreed on tax rates or the nuances of a social program, but you shared a common language. You shared a center. Now open your eyes and look at where we are today. That center hasn't just moved, it has effectively collapsed. We are living through a great centrifugal force. A world where the right and the left are no longer just different opinions. They've hardened into different worlds. We don't see neighbors anymore. We see existential threats. We don't see debate. We see a war of identities. How did we get here? What does it feel, or why does it feel like our brains are being farmed for outrage by the very devices we keep in our pockets? Today we're stepping into the blind spot of political drift. We're going to look at the mechanics of how we're being pulled apart and how to find our focus before the center gives way entirely. Welcome to the blind spot. I'm Lydia. If you feel like you no longer recognize the political landscape of your own country, you aren't alone. In just 2 decades, the center of American politics hasn't just moved, it has effectively collapsed. What we used to call the right and the left have drifted toward the fringes. And those fringes have hardened into something far more dangerous. Radical extremism. Today we're looking at the blind spot of political drift. We're going to analyze how a healthy disagreement over policy transformed into an existential war of identities. We'll look at the Overton Window, the role of algorithmic echo chambers, and why the radicalization of one side serves as the perfect fuel for the radicalization of the other. To understand how we got here, we have to understand the Overton Window. This is the range of policies considered acceptable to the mainstream population. In the 1990s, the window was narrow. Both parties argued over the rate of the tax or the implementation of a social program. But today, the window has shattered. On the left, we've seen a transition from liberalism, which valued free speech and open debate, to a radical neo-Marxist framework that views all human interaction through the lens of power dynamics and oppression. What was far left 10 years ago like defunding police or gender theory for toddlers, is now mainstream dogma. On the right, the transition has been a reactive hardening. We've moved from conservatism, which sought to preserve institutions, to a populist nationalism that is often willing to dismantle those same institutions if they are perceived as a part of the deep state. The blind spot is that both sides now view the other not as an opponent to be debated, but as an existential threat to be eliminated. When you believe your neighbor is an existential threat, radicalism isn't just an option. It becomes a perceived necessity. Why is this happening so fast? Because our brains are being farmed by algorithms. In the old world of 3 news networks, there was a forced consensus. You had to hear a version of the other side's argument. In the digital world, the algorithm only cares about one thing: engagement. And nothing engages a human brain like outrage. This creates a centrifugal force. As the algorithm feeds you more of what you already believe, it simultaneously feeds you the worst possible version of what the other side believes. This is called nitpicking. Taking the most insane person on the fringe of the opposing side and presenting them as the average representative of that group. This leads to relational radicalization. You see a radical on the left, so you move further to the right to defend yourself. They see your move as a threat, so they move further left. We're in a doom loop where the extremes are now the ones driving the national conversation. While 70% of the people in the middle are left voiceless and exhausted. How do far right and left become radical right and left? The bridge is dehumanization. When a movement stops talking about tax codes and starts talking about pests, garbage, infestals, or deplorables, the transition is complete. On the radical left, we see the rise of identity absolutism, where your worth is tied entirely to your group identity. And anyone outside that group is a colonizer or an oppressor who deserves no platform. On the radical right, we see the rise of accelerationism, the belief that the system is so corrupt that it must be burned down entirely, regardless of what replaces it. The blind spot here is that both extremes have adopted the same tactic. The end justifies the means. If the other side is truly evil, then lying, doxing, violence, and the erosion of due process become moral acts. At this point, you aren't a political movement anymore. You're a revolutionary cell. Now let's view this topic through a Christian lens. As we find our focus today, we have to look at the spiritual root of this drift. As Christians, we must recognize that the far right and the far left are often seeking the same thing: secular salvation. When a society loses its moral anchor, its connection to God, it will inevitably turn politics into a religion. The Bible warns us about idolatry. An idol isn't just a golden calf. It's anything we look to for our ultimate identity, security, and meaning. When your tribe becomes your identity, you have made it an idol. Scripture tells us in Philippians 3:20 that our citizenship is in heaven. This doesn't mean we don't care about our country, but it means our primary loyalty cannot be to a left or right banner. If you find yourself hating your neighbor because of a political label, you are failing the greatest commandment. You cannot love your neighbor as yourself if you have spent the last 3 hours on an algorithmic feed learning why that neighbor is subhuman. Radicalism is a symptom of the soul that has replaced the peace of Christ with the power of the party. The blind spot is believing that the only way to fight radicalism is with more radicalism. But fire doesn't put out fire. Our mission isn't to win a war of extinction. It's to restore the focus on truth, responsibility, and the image of God in every person, even those we disagree with. The question isn't, do we need the right and left regarding political, social, and cultural issues? It's where do we find our center? For Christians, having a life centered on Jesus Christ is essential. While we await our appointment with heaven, we must live our lives here on earth. That means that we stand firm in our beliefs. We are not perfect, but we must strive to look at politics, culture, and society through our Christian lens. Then take action. Or no action accordingly. Thank you for joining me today on The Blind Spot. I look forward to seeing you in my next video on the history of the song The Star-Spangled Banner. Please consider supporting this channel and content by engaging, subscribe, follow, like, share, comment, all those things. It really does help with the algorithm and getting our message out. To offer more direct support, consider becoming a patron. Go to patreon.com/theblindspotpodcast to view the details and choose your focus level. Thank you again. Keep searching to find your focus.